So I thought I'd provide you with a couple of examples of trainings that I've done and how these have helped people to perform at a higher level and achieve better outcomes by learning to address these internal factors of distress and disconnection and moving people towards a place of a really good connection and positive feelings. And so I think the examples show how this simple idea can be applied in a variety of different situations and how it can look kind of different depending on where you're applying it. And also it really gets applied in a way that makes sense to your organization and the style of applying it that you have and the ways that work for you. So I was working with a manager one time, and he was describing he had a particular difficulties with a certain member of staff. That they would talk, it would get very negative, they would try and address concerns, and it was just a very difficult conversation. It would tend to go in many different directions, and towards the end of it then both of them would just feel kind of deflated, kind of stressed out by it, just not clear of where it was going. And really the manager was just trying to open up a conversation to help them to do better. So what we discovered was that actually what was going to work for that individual was actually closing doors. It was not about opening doors in that conversation. So the manager learned to be very specific and say, what are the things you're working on? Or what do you need from me so that you can do well? And just answering those simple questions for the very specific things that staff member was working on, and not really going into all the many other issues that might come about. By taking that approach with that particular staff member, that manager was able to create a better connection. The staff member felt supported and felt less stressed and performed better at work. And every week when they would have their supervision, it went much better. So the strategy there, the skill that manager learned was just kind of closing doors, just keeping it on track and on point to some very specific things as a way of reducing the distress and improving the connection. So another example was I was helping people who were working with teenagers, and these particular teenagers happened to have a lot of behavioral concerns and compliance concerns. And they were trying to develop a way of helping them do better in the program. And of course my approach is, well, let's find a way of doing it that's going to help them feel better connected to the program and help them feel less distressed by what's going on, because really underneath those behaviors and those problems is really distress and disconnection. So one of the strategies that I give them to use, one that I've used a lot of times myself, is that when you're meeting with somebody, a teenager in the program, and there's been some concern around behavior, ignore the behavior, at least initially, and just sit down with them, ask them how they're feeling about the program, how things are going, and just connect with them on that level. If they have any concerns, just be sure that they feel understood, that you're aware of them. And oftentimes there may be some solutions you can work on together to address some of those and at least bring them into process. Say, I really appreciate some of the difficulties you're having, some of the things that are stressing you out, and I've noted them down, and here's some of the specific things I'm going to work on to try and help you with those, and I'll get back to you whenever, either tomorrow or next week, whatever the appropriate time frame was. And so initially they're coming in and they have some behavioral concerns, some issue went wrong, and your strategy is you're not going to talk really about that initially. You're going to just say, how's it going? How's the program going? What happened? I'd really like to understand what was going on, and and then when they're feeling connected to you, feeling that you've understood them and that you're supporting them and that you're on their side and you really want to help them, then towards the end of the conversation, you might bring in something like, and can I just please ask you, this situation that occurred, it's just not, it's not good for the house. It doesn't really help. It's not good for the program we're working in. And can we figure out a way of maybe trying to make a way that this won't happen the next time this occurs? So you kind of bring that in at the end, and they're feeling connected to you, they're feeling understood, and pretty soon you'll come up with some ways to address those behaviors. Sometimes when I was working with teenagers, I'd sit down, I'd understand them, I'd give them the space to talk about what's going on and connect to them in a positive way. And then at the end I'd simply say, it's not okay to be, whatever it was, using inappropriate language or being disrespectful or whatever the behavior was. And I said, it's not okay to do that, because everybody in the house needs to be respectful to each other, everybody in the program. And I would just say, can you think of an idea that we could do so that this wouldn't happen again, so that you wouldn't do that again? And let them come up with the idea, and they come up with all kinds of interesting ideas. So that's just an example of responding in a way that improves the connection, reduces the distress in order to address behavioral concerns and compliance concerns of teenagers. So another example, I was working with a manager, and in his business, his staff did a lot of phone work, and oftentimes it was stressful work on the phone. They would be dealing with some difficult conflicts, and he had a problem that sometimes his staff would just get, overly emotional perhaps on the phone, just feeling stressed out by it, feeling, angry or just upset by the whole conversation, and then sort of bringing that into the conversation, which never benefited anybody. So he was just trying to find a way to change that behavior. And again, I just asked him to focus on what was underlying that behavior from those staff, and it really was they were feeling stressed, they were feeling overwhelmed, they were just having very negative feelings about what was going on. And if we can address those, then the behaviors he's wanting to change will adjust as well. So we came up with a simple idea. I said, what about if you just start talking to them about a scale from 0 to 10, with 10 being completely calm and at peace, and 10 being just completely out of control, overwhelmed, just a lot of negative emotions. And basically explaining to the staff that anything over a 3 on that scale is a concern. If you're feeling you're a 4 or 5, you kind of might need to make some adjustments and sort of cool things down a little bit. And that could be many things. It could be just taking a deep breath. It could be just saying, finishing the phone call and saying, I'll call you back at such a time, going for a walk, having a cup of tea, whatever. And just come up with many ideas that you might do. And he actually then went further than that. He made a little kind of postcard that showed a picture of somebody really calm on one side, really distressed on the other. The scale in the middle was kind of 0 to 10, and kind of between 0 and 3 was green, and then it got yellow, and then it got red. So when you were getting into the yellow, that's when it was time to do something to kind of calm yourself down a bit. So it worked very well. The staff loved it. They were happier at their work because they weren't getting as stressed out, and they were empowered to take action when they were feeling, at a level of a 4 or 5 or whatever. And also, the phone calls tended to improve because people knew that the phone call wasn't going to get out of control, and that the quality of the calls were better. So the work was better, people were happier just by simply developing the capacity. And that's really an organizational thing there, because it was affecting the whole organization as they were working, and developing that capacity to just deal with the internal factors of distress. And but what was really cool about that, though, was that not alone did they use that on the phone calls, it tended to become part of the culture of their organization. So when they were working with each other, if things tended to get to a 4 or 5, everybody knew, it's just time to take a break, we'll come back and we'll refocus, we'll talk about this again. And also what happened was interesting, that people who were working with them realized, they might go to them at one point being very angry and upset and inappropriately disrespectful to them, and they knew that person they were working with, the member of staff, would say, let's get back to this, let's take a break, and we'll just calm down and get back to it. And what started happening is that people would just stay calm. They just wouldn't even go over 3 or 4 or 5, because they knew it just wasn't going to go anywhere. So the whole organization changed, the phone calls improved, the way the staff were connecting with each other, the way people outside of the organization were connecting with staff, everything improved just by setting some things in place and developing that capacity as an organization to deal with the internal factors. So the next way, trainings that I do with people to help them build their skill and capacity as an organization, is getting formal feedback. This would be my favorite way of doing it. I do it all the time with everybody I work with, and I encourage other people when they feel comfortable. It's just you fill out a simple form, usually just 3 or 4 questions on it that relate to those internal factors. And you discuss them, and usually if you're working with somebody every week, you can discuss them every week and chart them. So for example, I would show people in a program, a recovery program for mental health or addiction concerns, to be able to sit down and spend 5 minutes with the client going through the program, and ask them how their level of distress and how they're feeling about the program, how they're feeling about the people they're meeting in the program, the support they're getting, the goals we're working on right, is the way we're working together right, and just chart that week by week. Both of them agree that we really want you to have a positive experience, and just come up with some ideas each week. And that way, everybody in the program has a really good connection with the program, really positive experience, and that really promotes really great outcomes from mental health and addiction treatment. So that's just another option for addressing those internal factors in a very systematic, structured way. It's very simple. And again, also in those recovery programs, it would save a lot of time and difficulty, because some of the more difficult behaviours you might see may not even occur in the program because we're managing the internal factors so well. So another example is working with teenagers. And again, it's really around those boundaries when there's inappropriate language or behavior or whatever it is. And it's like, how do members of staff help those teenagers get back on track into a good place? And so I was working with a team of people, helping them to figure out their path for doing this. And there was a variety of different approaches, and they were arguing about, well, we should do it this way or should we do it that way? And so I just offered them a very simple idea. I said, look, there's lots of really good ways for helping teenagers get back on track and adjust their behavior and really start being more pro-social and appropriate. And I said, but whatever way you choose, I want you to check in with that teenager at the end of the process to make sure they're feeling less distressed and that they have a better connection with you and the work that you're doing. And that was it. And then that really empowered people to find the style that worked for them. And all they had to do was that whatever style they chose, and there's many different ways of doing it, that it was decreasing the stress, improving positive feelings, and improving the quality of the connection. Because one of the mistakes that we make when working with teenagers is we do things to try and help them to improve their behavior, if that's a concern, that increases the distress, that actually strains our connection and our relationship with them. And that really, overall, in the end, that doesn't really work that well. So that was really what I was helping them to avoid. And what they discovered was that they had many different styles. Like, for example, my style is a very easygoing style. I would just, sit down with them and say, look, it's not okay, and tell me what's going on, and let's figure this out together. Just your kind of your punishment for misbehaving is that you're going to have to sit down with me for 20 minutes. And usually we'd talk it through and we'd figure it out. And some of the people then, they chose other approaches that suited them. And I said, that's fine, as long as that youth is feeling more connected to you and less distressed, and you can have that conversation with them about the experience. And it's okay if sometimes you do stuff that strains the connection and distresses it. Just talk about that and say, look, that's not how I want this to go. Can we figure it out? Can we do it better next time if this occurs again? And what you'll find as you're doing that, every time there's a behavioral concern, you're reducing that teenager's distress, improving their positive feelings, you're improving your connection with them. And that, more than anything, will change their behavior. So another example of trainings that I did to help programs run better, to develop organizational capacity, was a recovery program. And they needed to set down the boundary that for this particular recovery program, they were dealing with clients in aftercare, and there was simply a very simple rule that they weren't allowed to be, any drink or drugs in them, on them, or about them. So basically, they had to kind of, if somebody seemed to be intoxicated, they had to just sort of enforce that boundary. And it was very important because all the other clients going to the program really appreciated the fact that they felt it was a safe place. It meant an awful lot to them. So this boundary was key to the program working well, and it meant a lot to all of the clients who were coming. They felt it was a safe place for their recovery. But yet it was difficult for staff to enforce, because they felt like, sometimes somebody would appear to be intoxicated, and then that person might say, no, I'm fine. It's maybe some other reasons, I'm tired or whatever, and it would be distressing, and then it was just a very difficult situation to enforce that. And the problem was, when it's a difficult situation to enforce, sometimes it may not get enforced because it's a negative experience both for the staff and for the clients. So when I was working with them, I said, let's just figure out a way of doing this so that when we do enforce boundaries with clients, again, it's going to improve our connection with them. It's going to help them feel calmer, feel more connected, and hopefully feel supported and comforted if they're going through some difficulties, but yet absolutely enforcing that boundary. And so we just came up with ideas, ways of doing it. And one of the things we did was we said, look, the rule is going to be when you have the appearance of being intoxicated. Because I can't tell if you're intoxicated or not, and I'm not going to do a drug test on you, but I can certainly say from your appearance, from the way you're sitting on your chair and talking and stuff like that, it's a concern. And then I can explain to you my motivation, and the reason is we just want to keep this a safe environment for everybody. And the third thing then I can explain to people is that I want to support you. You're going to have to leave the program for today and hopefully come back tomorrow, but let's make a little plan about how you can have a good afternoon. So it was all about choosing to do it in a way that was going to improve it. And what we found really was that the staff were great at it. They just found all kinds of wonderful ways for doing that once you empower them and you give them that way of understanding it. And also, I think there was a lot of work done as well explaining our approach to the clients before it ever happened. So we're kind of setting ourselves up. It was like we knew this was going to happen sometimes, So it wasn't that we were just going to let it happen and then deal with it. What we would do is, when we were introducing the program to clients, we would explain our whole approach to clients. So they would kind of say, oh, that's good, that makes sense. And then it was a lot easier for us. So we're kind of setting things up as well so that it was easier for us to maintain that boundary in a way that helped clients feel more supported and more connected to the program. So another example is I was in a situation where there was a person who had very racist attitudes. And he was going to have to be in a program with a person, an African American, and he said it was something he was very uncomfortable with. So again, I was working with the team. They were very concerned about this. They said, how are we going to deal with this? This is going to be trouble. And so my approach is, you don't want to bring stress. You don't want to bring, oh, this is going to be really troublesome. This person's going to be a problem. You don't want to be approaching a person from the perspective of, you're a problem. So I said, let's try and improve the connection here, So I taught them a little bit about what summarizing is, just listening to somebody and then kind of reflecting back to them what they've said so they feel that they're understood. And then a little bit about framing, just explaining where you're coming from. So when they were working with this person again later on in the week, first of all, they listened. They understood where he was coming from. They understood his concerns. They listened a bit more deeply, and they understood the roots of where his racism was coming from, and just understood all that. And then afterwards they explained, well, here's where we're coming from, and it's important that the program works, and this program is for everybody. We don't discriminate against anybody. We create a safe environment for everybody. And how can we do this? And we acknowledge where you're at and what your feelings are, but we still have to create a safe environment. And we're not asking you to to feel differently, and to be a different person, but we are asking you to be respectful and to speak appropriately, and so on. And really, from engaging this kind of process of improving connection, helping people feel understood, and just being clear about what was going on and reducing the tension around the whole thing. It just worked out fine, really. It wasn't so much of an issue, and both people were able to get served very well by the program and do well. So another example of applying this very simple idea of addressing the internal factors of how we approach situations to help improve outcomes and help things do better is potty training with children. So I was coaching a parent one time, and they were quite distressed. They felt that their child should have figured out how to be be toilet trained and use the potty and all that. And so I knew they were bringing a lot of stress to that situation every time it was happening. Perhaps being disappointed that there had been an accident again and just being upset about it and all that. So I really just coached them to encourage them to say, look, the first thing is that your child will figure out potty training, eventually. So it's nothing to be too worried about. And I also, told them that developmentally every child is different, and some childs figure things out earlier, and some children it's later, and they just develop at different rates. And just invited the parents to be completely comfortable with what was going on. And then we just talked about ways of trying to solve the problem and come up with some ideas and some strengths and different strategies to try and learn. But the key was that parent was not approaching it from being distressed and upset that this was happening, but just accepting and calm and okay. And it was much more likely to do a lot better. And also their relationship with their children was going to be a lot better, because obviously potty training can be quite difficult for kids as well, and stressful, trying to figure out something new. And having their parent being comforting and supporting and accepting would be a good place to be at, and set things up moving in a very positive direction moving forward. And at one point the parent was so distressed, she said, well, maybe I should let my daughter sit in the poo for a little while if they have an accident. And really, I was just explaining, you don't want to do anything to distress the child more. It's already difficult for them. I'd say just come from a place of acceptance and compassion and learning and growing and development. And so really, the specific ideas they then used to help them potty train they were good. But the more important thing was they were approaching it from a much calmer, a much more positive, a much more supportive and accepting perspective. And things are likely to work out a lot better. And actually, if you think about it, really, what you're setting up then is that there's going to be many difficulties developmentally and situation-wise for that child as they're growing up as a child, as a teenager. And you're setting up the precedence that you're going to approach those in a way that brings support and calm and acceptance. You're going to address these challenges together in a way that brings you closer together, that helps you have good, maintains that connection, And really what you're learning through that potty training process is that when difficult, stressful situations occur, that you can approach respond to those situations with love and support and understanding, and that's a great skill to learn early on in parenting, as opposed to responding to things that are difficult in a way that's more stressful and maybe more difficult in ways that will strain the relationship. So another example of using this idea of focusing on the internal factors of distress and disconnection to really try and solve problems and help things move in a positive direction is I was working with a father and a son. The son was a teenager, and the father would have described the son as being very defiant. The father just said, look, there's a certain time you need to be home by, and if you're out of the house, you need to let us know where you're at. And the son was saying this is very controlling, was unacceptable, couldn't deal with it, and it was just very, very difficult for the family. So in order to move this forward, I agreed that, look, this situation is very distressing for the son and for the father. They both agreed it was a distressing situation. They both agreed that neither of them wanted it to stay like this. So I said, okay, so let's try and do a few things to move it forward. Let's try and improve your connection. Let's try to reduce the distress that's going on here. So we improved the connection by, identifying the reason why there were those boundaries there. And it wasn't about trying to control the teenager. It was about safety. It was about taking care of him. It was about father doing what he felt he was supposed to do. And knowing where he was about making sure you're in a safe place, that it's okay. So the son felt, well, that was more reasonable, and that was something they could work on together to figure that out. And again, bringing more of a sense of collaboration, that both the son and the father had to agree collaboratively on some framework that they both felt was good to make sure the son was safe. So they discussed that and they worked it out. And also then about improving positive feelings, just doing some positive activities together. So by trying to move from distressed and disconnected to a more connected and more positive feeling space, we were able to communicate, able to understand people's motivations, generate some empathy. We were able to generate a sense of collaboration around solving the problem, and a lot of good things, and it moved forward. And also both sides agreeing that neither of them are finding the current situation very pleasant. It's not what either of them wanted. So just creating all that cohesion and connection, and then things move forward. So another way to apply this idea of looking at what's going on internally for people to help things perform at a better level is group work. I do a lot of group work, and oftentimes I help other people to develop their practice in group work so that it works better. And again, it just keeps coming back to tuning in to what people are experiencing in the group, and just finding out what's really working for them. So for example, I was doing a parenting skills group, and as I was doing it, I began to realize that what parents are really looking for here, it's not so much theories or stuff like that. They just want practical things to do. So when they're in a difficult situation with their child or their teenager, they want, well, what's a practical way that I can do? So I learned that was a really good thing to bring to the group, because people really got a lot from it. So I said, the next time I do the group, I'll bring more of that. Just really kind of attuning the support I was giving to people to what people were saying they were really feeling supported by. So another one would be, I did a PTSD group, a trauma recovery group. And I had different ways of starting the group, and one time I started it with a reading from a certain book that I like, and everybody said, wow, that's fantastic, that really captures what we're all about. So then I would just kind of say, oh, well, this is what people are telling me. They really feel a positive connection with this way of doing the group, so I would bring that into it. And again, so what I would do over time as I'm doing groups, I'm constantly learning what's really connecting and really meaningful to people, and bringing that more into the group. And I'm also learning there might be certain things that go on during the group that people find really frustrating and just not a very positive experience. And I try and invite the group to talk about that, so that we can hopefully learn from it and make sure people are having a positive experience. Because when we're doing the group work, whether it's a parenting skills group or whether it's a trauma recovery group, if everybody in there is feeling safe, feeling supported, feeling connected, feeling we're working on the right goals, we're working on it the right way, and having a positive connection with all the other people in the group. And those are really internal factors. Those are all independent of what specific exercises we're doing. But if those internal factors are in a good place, you're going to get great outcomes. So just going back to the group work stuff, what I do is I use a lot of feedback. Feedback is really telling me about these internal factors, where they're at. So one is called real-time feedback. It's right in that moment when I'm with somebody. What's the energy in the room? What's the expressions people have in their faces? What's the tone in their voices? it's all kind of giving me information about that. The next one would be verbal feedback. And there's two kinds. One is kind of indirect. It's just when people are talking about the group, so I really like this, or that was a concern. I haven't specifically asked them to tell me about their internal experience, but they're just saying it. So I'm just listening to that sort of verbal feedback that's indirect. I'm not directly asking them to tell me about their internal experience. The next type of feedback will be direct. I just say, how's the group going for everybody so far? Are we kind of in a good groove? Are we moving in a good direction? I think, is this what we want to spend the rest of the group doing? So that's kind of directly asking people. And then the other type of feedback is formal feedback, which I do at the end of every group. Just get a little form, answer a few questions, talk about it, and make little charts so you can see from week to week that you're having a more positive experience, that you're connecting with everybody, and connecting with the work we're doing. It's meaningful to you, and it's a good fit for how you want to do the work. So really, that's the key of using a lot of feedback and the different ways you can use it. It's just a way of developing your work so that these internal factors are in a really good place.